You need to show me some ID right now. This is a parole check, not your playground.
I'm showing it to you. Federal Bureau of Investigation. You can read, can't you?
That doesn't mean you get to stand in my scene. Step back and let me do my
job
job.
Just collided with mine. I'm not stepping.
Sir, the handcuffs clicked shut around Marcus Holloway's wrists at 12:04 a.m. on a Tuesday night in October. He was standing 3 feet from his own front door. His keys were still in his right hand when Officer Kevin Bannister pulled his arms behind his back. The metal bit into his skin, cold and unforgiving. Marcus Holloway had worn handcuffs before, but always on the other side of the arrest. He was an FBI special agent. He had been with the Bureau for 11 years. He had testified before Congress twice. He had received 3 commendations for excellence in the field. He had helped dismantle human trafficking rings, drug cartels, and criminal organizations that most Americans only read about in headlines. And now he was being arrested at his own apartment door by a parole officer who had no idea who he was and no legal authority to touch him. "I am complying under protest," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fury building in his chest. "This is an unlawful detention." The parole officer standing 6 feet away said nothing. Donald Pritchett simply watched, arms folded across his chest, a look of satisfaction settling into the lines of his face. He had won. Or at least he believed he had. "Let me take you back 17 minutes. Marcus Holloway pulled into the parking garage of his apartment complex in downtown Detroit just before midnight. His body ached. His eyes burned from staring at surveillance footage for the past 16 hours. He had been tracking a human trafficking ring that stretched across 3 states, coordinating with field offices in Chicago and Cleveland, cross-referencing witness statements with financial records. The work was exhausting, brutal, and necessary. Marcus believed in it. He had dedicated his life to it. All he wanted now was to microwave the leftover jollof rice his sister had dropped off last weekend, call his daughter Amara in Atlanta before she went to sleep, and get 6 uninterrupted hours of rest. That was the plan. Simple. Ordinary. The kind of evening millions of Americans take for granted. Marcus rode the elevator to the 8th floor. His FBI credentials were still clipped to his belt, hidden beneath his jacket. He wore dark slacks and a button-down shirt, professional but understated. His service weapon sat in its holster at his hip. He had carried that weapon for over a decade. He had never once drawn it outside of training or active duty. Marcus was not a man who looked for trouble. He was a man who solved it. The hallway was quiet. The hum of the ice machine near the stairwell provided the only sound. Marcus walked toward apartment 814, his keys already in hand. He had lived in this apartment for 3 years. He knew every crack in the ceiling, every squeak in the floorboards, every neighbor on the floor. This was home. That was when he saw the man standing near apartment 816. Donald Pritchett was a parole officer for the Michigan Department of Corrections. He was white, mid-40s, with a crew cut and the kind of build that suggested former athleticism surrendered to years of desk work and fast food. He held a folder in one hand and a phone in the other. He looked up as Marcus approached. "Excuse me," Pritchett said. His tone was flat, lacking any warmth or professional courtesy. "Do you live on this floor?" Marcus stopped at his door. The key hovered near the lock. "I do. Can I help you with something?" Pritchett stepped closer. His eyes moved from Marcus's face down to his shoes and back up again. The scan was slow, deliberate, assessing. Marcus had seen that look before. He had seen it from police officers during traffic stops. He had seen it from security guards in department stores. He had seen it from strangers on the street who crossed to the other side when they saw him coming. It was the look of suspicion without cause. The look of assumption without evidence. "I'm looking for someone," Pritchett said. "What apartment are you coming out of?" Marcus felt the first flicker of irritation. "I'm not coming out of anywhere. I'm going into my apartment. 814, right here." Pritchett's expression hardened. Something shifted behind his eyes, a decision being made in real time. "I'm going to need to see some ID." Marcus had been through this before. He knew the script. He knew that compliance was often the fastest route through these encounters, even when compliance felt like surrender. He took a slow breath. "I'm a federal agent," Marcus said calmly. "I live here. Is there something specific you need?" "ID," Pritchett repeated, His voice rose slightly. Now. Marcus reached into his jacket slowly, making sure his movements were visible and non-threatening. He pulled out his credentials, the same black leather bifold he had shown to senators and CEOs and foreign dignitaries. The badge gleamed under the hallway lights. The identification card displayed his photo, his name, his title. FBI Special Agent Marcus Holloway. Pritchett barely glanced at it. "That doesn't prove you live here," Pritchett said. "I need a driver's license and proof of residence." Marcus lowered the credentials. "You're a parole officer, not a police officer. You don't have authority to demand identification from me without cause. I've identified myself as a federal agent. I'm entering my own home." Pritchett pulled out his phone. "We'll see about that." Marcus Holloway had dedicated his adult life to law enforcement. He understood jurisdictions, protocols, and the boundaries of authority. He knew that parole officers in Michigan had broad powers to search the residences of parolees, but only the residences of individuals actively under their supervision. Marcus was not on parole. Marcus had never been arrested. Marcus had never committed a crime. There was no legal basis for this confrontation. But Donald Pritchett did not care about legal basis. Within 4 minutes, 2 Detroit Police Department patrol officers arrived in the hallway. Officers Kevin Bannister and Lydia Chow stepped off the elevator and walked toward the scene. Pritchett met them halfway, speaking in a low voice, gesturing toward Marcus. Marcus stood at his door, arms folded across his chest, watching the conversation he was not invited to join. Officer Bannister approached first. He was younger than Pritchett, maybe early 30s, with a cautious expression that suggested he was still learning when to assert authority and when to defer to it. "Sir, we received a call about a disturbance," Bannister said. "Can you tell us what's going on?" Marcus explained the situation clearly and calmly. He was an FBI special agent returning home from work. The parole officer had confronted him without cause. Marcus showed his credentials again. Officer Chow examined the badge carefully, turning it over in her hands, studying the identification card. "Do you have a driver's license that shows this address?" Chow asked. Marcus pulled out his wallet and provided his Michigan driver's license. The address matched apartment 814. Chow showed it to Bannister. Bannister nodded. "Looks like everything checks out," Bannister said to Pritchett. "This is his apartment." That should have been the end of it. The verification was complete. The identification was confirmed. There was no dispute, no ambiguity, no reason to continue. But Donald Pritchett was not satisfied. "I have reason to believe a parolee is using this apartment," Pritchett said. "I need to verify who's inside." Marcus felt his patience evaporating. "There's no one inside. I live alone. You have no warrant, no reasonable suspicion, and no authority here." Pritchett turned to the officers. "He's being uncooperative. I'm conducting a lawful parole check." Officer Bannister hesitated. He looked at Pritchett, then at Marcus, then back at Pritchett. The uncertainty was written across his face. He was caught between competing authorities, unsure of the law, unwilling to challenge the man who had called him there. "Who's the parolee you're looking for?" Bannister asked. Pritchett checked his folder. "Darnell Simmons. Last known address was this building." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Darnell Simmons doesn't live here. I've lived here for 3 years. You can verify that with building management." But Pritchett had already made his decision. The parole officer looked at the 2 police officers and spoke with absolute certainty. "I need entry to confirm." Marcus refused. He would not open his door without a warrant. He would not submit to an illegal search. He knew his rights. He had spent his career protecting those rights for others. Pritchett's response was immediate. "He's obstructing a lawful investigation." Officer Bannister made his choice. He stepped toward Marcus. "Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." Marcus could not believe what he was hearing. "I'm a federal agent. I'm standing at my own door. You have no legal basis." "Sir, don't make this harder." Marcus complied. He turned around. He placed his hands behind his back. The handcuffs closed around his wrists. The metal was cold against Marcus's skin. The handcuffs were standard issue, the same kind Marcus had placed on suspects dozens of times throughout his career. He knew exactly how they felt from the other side of the arrest, the way they restricted movement, the way they signaled surrender. But he had never imagined feeling them on his own wrists. Not like this. Not at his own front door. Officer Chow stood to the side, her expression uncomfortable but her mouth closed. She said nothing. She did not intervene. She did not question her partner's decision. She simply watched as Bannister secured the handcuffs and checked that they were tight but not dangerously so. Donald Pritchett stood back, arms still folded, watching the scene with the calm satisfaction of a man who believed he had restored order. He had called. The police had come. The black man was in handcuffs. In Pritchett's mind, the system was working exactly as it should. "Let's take him downstairs while we sort this out," Pritchett said. Marcus kept his voice level, though every instinct in his body screamed for him to fight back. "I am a federal agent. You are making a serious mistake. I want your badge numbers. I want your names. This is being documented." Bannister guided Marcus toward the elevator. The walk down the hallway felt endless. Marcus passed doors he had passed 1,000 times before. He passed the ice machine, the stairwell, the small table where building management sometimes left flyers about community events. Everything looked the same as it always did. But everything had changed. The elevator descended slowly. No one spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with things unsaid. Marcus stared at the digital numbers counting down the floors. 8, 7, 6. He thought about his daughter Amar. He thought about what he would tell her when he called tomorrow. He thought about whether he would tell her at all. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. The building's night security guard, an older black man named Theodore, looked up from his desk. His eyes went wide when he saw Marcus in handcuffs, flanked by 2 police officers and followed by a man in civilian clothes. "Mr. Holloway?" Theodore said, rising from his chair. "What's going on here?" No one answered him. Bannister guided Marcus through the lobby and out the front entrance. The October air was cold, biting at Marcus's face and hands. The patrol car sat at the curb, its lights off but its presence unmistakable. Bannister opened the back door. "Watch your head," Bannister said. Marcus ducked into the back seat. The door closed behind him. The interior smelled like sweat and cleaning solution, the accumulated residue of every person who had sat in this seat before him. Marcus looked out the window at his own apartment building. The lights in the lobby cast a warm glow across the sidewalk. Theodore stood at the glass doors, watching. 45 minutes. That was how long Marcus Holloway sat in the back of that patrol car. 45 minutes while officers verified his story. 45 minutes while Pritchett spoke with building management. 45 minutes while neighbors walked past, glanced at the police car, and saw a black man in handcuffs. One neighbor, a young white woman Marcus had never spoken to, slowed her pace as she walked by. She pulled out her phone. She took a photo. Marcus saw the flash. He saw her look at the screen, type something, and continue walking. He wondered where that photo would end up. He wondered how many people would see it. He wondered what story they would tell themselves about the man in the back of the police car. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Marcus thought about the human trafficking victims he had been working to save just hours earlier. He thought about the testimony he had given before Congress, the commendations on his wall, the oath he had sworn to protect and defend the Constitution. None of it mattered now. None of it protected him. In this moment, he was not Special Agent Marcus Holloway. He was just another black man in handcuffs, presumed guilty until proven innocent. At 12:49 a.m., Officer Chow approached the patrol car. She opened the back door. Her expression was different now, touched with something that might have been embarrassment or might have been guilt. "Building management confirmed your residency," Chow said. "You're free to go." Marcus did not move immediately. "Am I being charged with anything?" Chow shook her head. "No charges." "Then I want these handcuffs removed properly, and I want to speak with your supervisor." Bannister appeared behind Chow. He reached into the car and unlocked the handcuffs. The metal fell away from Marcus's wrists, leaving red marks where they had pressed against his skin. Marcus stepped out of the patrol car slowly, deliberately. He stood on the sidewalk outside his own building, rubbing his wrists, looking at the two officers who had just detained him for 45 minutes without cause. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience," Bannister said. The words sounded rehearsed, empty, automatic. "Where is Pritchett?" Marcus asked. Bannister gestured vaguely. "He left about 20 minutes ago." Marcus looked around. The street was quiet. Pritchett's car was gone. The man who had started all of this, who had demanded identification, who had accused Marcus of obstruction, who had insisted on entry to an apartment he had no right to enter, had simply left. No accountability. No consequences. Just gone. Marcus walked back into his building. Theodore was still at the security desk, his face creased with concern. "Mr. Holloway, are you all right? What happened out there?" Marcus paused. He did not know how to answer. How do you explain being arrested at your own front door? How do you explain the humiliation of sitting in a police car while your neighbors take photos? How do you explain that your badge, your credentials, your 11 years of service meant nothing in the face of one man's suspicion? "I'm all right, Theodore," Marcus said finally. "Just a misunderstanding." But it was not a misunderstanding. Marcus knew that. Theodore probably knew that too. They both understood what had really happened, even if neither of them had the words for it in that moment. Marcus rode the elevator back to the 8th floor. The hallway was empty now. No parole officer. No police officers. Just the same quiet corridor he had walked through an hour earlier, before everything changed. He stopped at apartment 814. His keys were still in his pocket. Bannister had returned them after removing the handcuffs. Marcus unlocked his door and stepped inside. The apartment was dark. He did not turn on the lights. He simply stood in the entryway, listening to the silence, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle onto his shoulders. His phone buzzed. A text from his daughter. "Hey Dad, tried calling but you didn't answer. Everything okay? Call me tomorrow. Love you." Marcus stared at the message for a long time. He thought about calling her back, even though it was past 1 in the morning. He thought about telling her what had happened. But what would he say? That her father, the FBI agent, the man who had taught her to believe in justice and the rule of law, had just been arrested at his own front door because a parole officer decided he did not belong? He put the phone down. He did not call her that night. The next morning, Marcus filed a formal complaint. He filed it with the Detroit Police Department's Office of the Chief Investigator. He filed it with the Michigan Department of Corrections. He documented every detail of the encounter, every word that was spoken, every violation of his rights that had occurred. He named Donald Pritchett. He named officers Kevin Bannister and Lydia Chow. He requested copies of body camera footage, incident reports, and any documentation related to the alleged parole check. For weeks, Marcus heard nothing. His complaints disappeared into the bureaucratic machinery of 2 separate agencies. No one called him back. No one acknowledged his letters. The system that was supposed to provide accountability seemed designed instead to provide silence. Marcus continued to work. He continued to track criminals, gather evidence, testify in court. He did his job the same way he had always done it. But something had changed inside him. The trust he had placed in the system, the belief that his badge and his service meant something, had been shaken. He had seen the other side now. He had felt the handcuffs. He had sat in the back of the car. He understood, in a way he had not fully understood before, what it meant to be seen as a suspect before being seen as a person. 3 weeks after the incident, Marcus received a call from a woman named Simone Garrett. She was a civil rights attorney based in Detroit, and she had heard about his case through a contact at the police department. "Mr. Holloway," Garrett said, "I've reviewed your complaint, and I think there's something much larger happening here. Would you be willing to meet with me?" Marcus agreed. He had no idea what Garrett had found, but he was about to discover that his encounter with Donald Pritchett was not an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that had been hiding in plain sight for years. Simone Garrett's office was small but organized, every surface covered with case files and legal documents. She had been practicing civil rights law for 15 years, taking on police departments, correctional facilities, and government agencies. She had won cases that seemed unwinnable. She had exposed misconduct that institutions wanted buried. When she called Marcus Holloway, she already knew something was wrong with his case. She just did not know how wrong. I subpoenaed Pritchett's case files, Garrett told Marcus during their first meeting. I wanted to understand why he was at your building that night. What I found doesn't make sense. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was the parole file for Darnell Simmons, the man Pritchett claimed to be looking for. Marcus opened the file and began reading. Darnell Simmons had never listed apartment 814 as a residence. In fact, Darnell Simmons had never listed any address in Detroit. According to the official records, Simmons lived in Lansing, 90 miles away. He had been checking in with his parole officer in Lansing regularly. 3 days before the incident at Marcus's building, Simmons had completed a routine check-in at the Lansing parole office. There was no reason for Donald Pritchett to be looking for Darnell Simmons in Detroit. But the file revealed something else. The address Pritchett had listed for Simmons was apartment 618, not apartment 814. Even if Pritchett had been conducting a legitimate parole check, he had been on the wrong floor entirely. Apartment 618 was 2 floors below Marcus's apartment. Pritchett had no reason to be standing outside apartment 814. He had no reason to be on the 8th floor at all. This could be incompetence, Marcus said, setting down the file. A mistake. Garrett shook her head. That's what I thought at first. Then I obtained the surveillance footage from your building. She pulled up the footage on her laptop. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m., 17 minutes before Marcus arrived home. The video showed Donald Pritchett entering the building through the front entrance. He walked past the elevator directory, which clearly displayed floor numbers and apartment ranges. He entered the elevator and pressed a button. The next clip showed Pritchett exiting the elevator on the 8th floor. Not the 6th floor, where apartment 618 was located. The 8th floor. Pritchett walked down the hallway and stopped outside apartment 814. Marcus's apartment. He stood there, checking his phone, waiting. He went directly to your floor, Garrett said. He walked past the directory. He knew exactly where he was going. This wasn't a mistake, Mr. Holloway. He was waiting for you. The revelation changed everything. This was not a case of bureaucratic error or poor judgment. Donald Pritchett had targeted Marcus deliberately. The question was why. Garrett filed a civil rights lawsuit against Pritchett, the city of Detroit, and officers Bannister and Chow. During the discovery phase, Garrett's investigators uncovered records that painted a disturbing portrait of Donald Pritchett's career. Pritchett had been the subject of 4 previous complaints from black parolees and their families. All 4 complaints alleged racial profiling, excessive use of authority, and harassment. One woman claimed Pritchett had searched her home without cause and berated her in front of her children. Another complaint described Pritchett making racially charged comments during a routine check-in. A third alleged that Pritchett had threatened a parolee with revocation for failing to show proper respect. None of the complaints had resulted in discipline. The Michigan Department of Corrections had investigated each one and closed the files without action. 2 of the complaints had been quietly settled with confidentiality agreements. The accusers paid to sign documents promising never to speak publicly about what had happened. But the most damning evidence came from Pritchett's own phone. Text messages retrieved during discovery showed a conversation between Pritchett and another parole officer from 3 weeks before the incident at Marcus's building. These guys think they own the building now, Pritchett had written. Need to remind them who's in charge. The context of the messages made clear what Pritchett was referring to. Marcus's apartment complex was located in a historically black neighborhood that had undergone rapid gentrification over the past decade. New developments had brought higher rents, new businesses, and demographic shifts. The building where Marcus lived had been renovated 2 years earlier, attracting young professionals and middle-class residents. Donald Pritchett did not live in Detroit. He lived in the suburbs, 30 miles from Marcus's apartment complex. He had no legitimate reason to be at that building on a Tuesday night in October. He was not conducting a parole check. He was conducting something else entirely. Simone Garrett sat across from Marcus, the text messages printed out between them. He was watching your building, Garrett said. He saw black residents moving in, establishing themselves, and he didn't like it. You weren't a parolee to him. You were a target. Marcus stared at the messages. He thought about the look in Pritchett's eyes when he demanded identification. He thought about the satisfaction on Pritchett's face when the handcuffs closed. He thought about the 45 minutes in the back of the patrol car, the neighbors walking past, the photo that woman had taken with her phone. How many others? Marcus asked. How many people did he do this to before me? Garrett did not have an exact number, but she knew it was more than 4. The complaints in Pritchett's file represented only the people who had come forward, who had the resources and the courage to file official reports. How many others had simply accepted the harassment as the cost of being black in America? How many had been too afraid to speak up, too distrustful of a system that had already failed them? The pattern was clear. The system had enabled it. And now, for the first time, someone was going to hold Donald Pritchett accountable. The trial took place in federal court 18 months after the night Marcus was arrested at his own door. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the gallery. Advocacy groups sent representatives to observe. The case had attracted national attention, becoming a symbol of the broader struggle against racial profiling and abuse of authority. Simone Garrett presented her case methodically. She called Marcus to the stand first. He testified for 3 hours, describing his career with the FBI, the events of that October night, and the lasting impact the arrest had on his life. He spoke about the humiliation of sitting in a patrol car outside his own building. He spoke about the neighbors who had seen him in handcuffs. He spoke about the conversation he eventually had with his daughter, explaining to her that her father's badge could not protect him from being treated like a criminal. Garrett's investigators testified next, presenting the surveillance footage, the case files, and the text messages. A use-of-force expert took the stand and testified that the detention was unlawful from the moment Pritchett demanded identification. Parole officers have authority over parolees, the expert explained, not over random citizens. Marcus Holloway was never under Pritchett's supervision. The demand for ID, the call to police, the arrest, all of it was illegal. The defense argued that Pritchett had made an honest mistake, that he believed he was conducting a legitimate parole check and simply went to the wrong floor. But the surveillance footage contradicted that claim. Pritchett had walked past the building directory. He had gone directly to the 8th floor. He had waited outside Marcus's apartment for 17 minutes before Marcus arrived. The jury was shown the text messages. Need to remind them who's in charge. The words hung in the courtroom, impossible to explain away. Officers Bannister and Chow testified as well. Bannister admitted that he had been uncertain about the legality of the arrest but had deferred to Pritchett's authority. Chow acknowledged that she had concerns but did not voice them. Both officers had failed to protect Marcus's constitutional rights. Both had chosen compliance over justice. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the courtroom fell silent. Guilty on all counts. The jury found that Donald Pritchett had violated Marcus Holloway's Fourth Amendment rights. They found that officers Bannister and Chow had acted with deliberate indifference. They found that the city of Detroit had failed to properly train its officers on the limits of parole authority and the rights of citizens. The damages, $7 million. The aftermath came swiftly. Donald Pritchett was terminated from the Michigan Department of Corrections. His pension was forfeited. He would never work in law enforcement again. Officers Bannister and Chow were suspended without pay and required to complete extensive civil rights training before returning to duty. The Detroit Police Department announced a comprehensive review of its policies regarding interactions with parole officers and the rights of citizens during non-criminal encounters. Marcus Holloway stood on the courthouse steps with Simone Garrett at his side. Cameras flashed. Microphones were thrust toward his face. Reporters shouted questions. Marcus waited for silence. Then he spoke. I was arrested at my own front door for the crime of being black in America. No badge, no credentials, no years of service could protect me from that. But the law, when applied correctly, can still deliver justice. This verdict is not just for me. It is for everyone who has been stopped, questioned, detained, and humiliated for no reason other than the color of their skin. The fight is not over. But today, we won a battle. $7 million. That was the price of 45 minutes in the back of a police car. That was the cost of red marks on wrists, a photo taken by a stranger, and a daughter who now understood that her father's badge meant nothing when the wrong person decided he did not belong. But Marcus Holloway knew the truth. Most people who experienced what he experienced would never see a courtroom. Most people did not have FBI credentials to prove their worth. Most people did not have Simone Garrett to fight for them. Most people simply endured the humiliation, filed it away with all the other humiliations, and moved on because moving on was the only option available. The system had failed long before that October night. For complaints against Donald Pritchett. For opportunities to intervene. For moments when someone could have said, "This man should not have authority over anyone." Instead, the complaints were buried. The settlements were signed. The silence was maintained. Marcus thought about the people who came before him. The woman whose home was searched without cause. The man who was threatened for failing to show respect. The families who signed confidentiality agreements because they needed the money and believed no one would listen anyway. Their pain had been erased from the official record, but it had not disappeared. It had accumulated, waiting for a moment of accountability that might never come. And Marcus thought about the people who would come after him. The young men who would be stopped on the street. The young women who would be questioned in their own neighborhoods. The children who would watch their parents submit to demands they had every right to refuse, learning early that rights are only as strong as the willingness to enforce them. The verdict changed things. The money changed things. The termination, the suspensions, the policy reviews, all of it mattered. But it was not enough. Justice should not require a federal trial. Justice should not require $7 million. Justice should not require being exceptional just to be believed. Marcus Holloway returned to work the week after the trial. He continued tracking criminals, building cases, protecting the vulnerable. But he carried something new with him now, a deeper understanding of what it meant to be on the other side of the system he served. He had felt the handcuffs. He had sat in the car. He knew. Before the credits roll, consider this. Marcus Holloway had everything a person could have to prove he belonged. Credentials. Commendations. Congressional testimony. A career dedicated to justice. And none of it mattered until a jury said it mattered. None of it protected him in that hallway at midnight. So ask yourself, what about everyone else? What about the people without badges, without attorneys, without surveillance footage to prove their truth? How many of them are still waiting for someone to believe them? And the hardest question of all, if the pattern was already there for complaints deep, how many people suffered before Marcus Holloway walked down that hallway? How many are suffering right now, in buildings just like his, in cities just like Detroit, waiting for justice that may never come? Drop your answer in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the fight is not over. It never is.